On the field, the Detroit Tigers drop 2 of 3 to the Twins, and off the field, they deal with injuries and trades. We'll talk about it all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, July 29th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get the fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. Welcome in, welcome all. Happy Monday, everybody. We have a lot to go over, so we are going to jump right into it here. Tigers dropped 2 of 3 to the Twins at home. That's what happened on the field, and we'll talk plenty about that and break down, what went right and what went wrong and whatnot. But they also dealt with a crushing injury that is going to be probably something we look back on and go, things may have fallen apart right there, but we'll see what happens. So we got to talk about that, and then obviously the trade of Carson Kelly happens on Sunday evening. And we'll talk about that trade and kind of the future, the next 48 hours and what could happen in the trade department there. So starting off with what went wrong, like I said, the Tigers dropped 2 of 3. They lose 3-9, win 7-2, and then lose 0-5 there against the Twins. Their record is now 52-55. But really, if you want to talk about what went wrong this weekend, there is nothing that tops the Riley Greene injury. Nothing, right? We can talk about, and we will talk about the play on the field. Very uninspired, especially on Sunday. Did scrape together a good, solid win on Saturday. Obviously, Tarek Skubal does well. There was plenty to take away from this series on the field. But at the end of the day, the injury to Riley Greene, for a lot of people, was like, okay, if you were on the fence about whether to trade away the rentals and kind of have a soft sell versus, standing pat, or even if you were in the buy camp, which I can't imagine there was too many people that were all, like gung-ho on go all in on this season. But regardless of where you stood, I mean, if you just looked around the fan base and around social media and whatnot, a lot of people like, okay, well, now you're looking at Kerry Carpenter hurt potentially for the rest of the season. Riley Greene now hurt for at least 10 days. We'll see how quickly he can come back. You have 2 healthy starting pitchers right now, and you're about to probably trade one of them. Like, it's really tough to look ahead and go, you know what, they can pull themselves out of this. They can fight for a wild card spot. Again, I have not been in that camp for a while, even with the really hot July that they've had. I've pretty much maintained, like, I think they probably can and should sell at the deadline. But I know that there were some people that were still a little bit on the fence. I think this series, losing a series to a team ahead of you in the division, plus the injury to Riley Greene, I think that's all she wrote for a lot of people. Obviously, we root for a quick and healthy recovery for Riley Greene. Unfortunately, this has just been a reoccurring theme throughout his career so far, just injury after injury. This season, he's been healthy, but coming off of Tommy John to start off the season, and then now, obviously, you have another leg injury, missed a large portion of last season due to stress fractures in at least one leg. I can't remember if it was both or not, but regardless, looks like another injury to his legs this season. I don't think it's correlated, but I'm also not a doctor, and they didn't really go too much in depth. It looks like a separate thing. So just brutal. Just an absolute gut punch to a team that was already fighting for every single win they could muster here in the month of July, put together a great month of July, saw Riley Greene in the All-Star game. Unfortunately, he finds himself on the injured list. Talk about it a little bit more toward the end of the show, just the roster move, the corresponding move, and whatnot. Keder Montero, unfortunately, on the side of things that went wrong this weekend as well. And this is a few outings in a row that have been really rough, and that is not awesome. When he first got called up, he got off to a slow start. His first two outings were not very great. Then he had a few really good outings, and then the last few have been rough again. I really am just going to sound like a broken record, like I have when talking about Montero this entire season, right? Like, this dude has really good stuff, and it's just very hit or miss on whether he knows where it's going every time he takes the bump. He's got a really solid fastball, a really good breaking stuff. I love the fact that the curveball and the slider are different pitches. I feel like we're kind of moving away from that, and everybody just has a sweeper now. Like, I really like the makeup of the repertoire. It doesn't matter if you can't, A, consistently throw it in the zone, and B, when you do throw it in the zone, miss the heart of the plate. And that is something that he struggles with, honestly, more than throwing strikes, is just all of the strikes he does throw are right down Broadway. It is in the cup, is what we used to say, right? Like, if you put a cup right in the center, what exactly would be, the exact center of the strike zone? You want to avoid the cup in the center of the zone, and he just, with his slider specifically, man, just a lot of hanging breaking balls, and it's tough because, again, you have Mize hurt, you have Maeda demoted, and you have demoted to the bullpen, obviously, that is, and you have Reese Olson hurt, and then you're probably going to trade Jack Flaherty. So I understand it's been frustrating. I don't think he's going anywhere. And I think they're going to try to iron out the shortcomings that he's had. Now, similar conversation to what we used to say about Colt Keith when he was struggling, right? Like, he needs to adjust to major league pitching. I think it's somewhat similar to Montero. Like, he needs to adjust to major league hitting, but he's been his own worst enemy for a lot of this, right? Like, granted, the mistake pitches get crushed a lot more in the majors than the minors, but, like, they are still, at the end of the day, mistake pitches. They are still his own doing of hanging a slider, over the heart of the plate type of thing. So we'll see what happens. I think he's here to stay. I think they're going to try to let him iron it out, especially with how thin the starting pitching depth has become seemingly overnight, right? Very, very quickly, it's become very thin. And so here we are. I don't think he's going anywhere, and I think we're just going to have to see if he can iron out the issues that he has been having. So we'll keep an eye on that, obviously. The offense struggles yet again. Seems like we are slowly but surely coming back down to earth of the I don't know, extreme over exceeding of expectations for a lot of July. It seems like in the last week they did put up a 7 spot on Saturday, but 3 on Friday and the shutout on Sunday against Cleveland. Your run total in the last 3 games of that series was 4, 1, and 3, right? At least it's not zeros every game and 0, 1, 1, 1, 0 like it was at one point there in June, but certainly has come back down to earth from that pre-All-Star break July, when it seemed like they were out of nowhere one of the better offenses in the American League. So we'll talk a little bit about that and keep the ball rolling, as we say here, right after this. I'm going to talk to you today about our friends over at Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost you get when an outfit makes you look really good? Well, that's what I get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you can get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget. They do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest and most up-to-date way to update your wardrobe this season. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. I just give my stylist my size, my style, my budget preferences, and I order boxes when I want, and how I want it. There's no subscription required or anything like that. And they send 5 just for me pieces plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep what works and I send back the rest. No pressure, no stress whatsoever. And if you don't love something, again, you can always send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. So get style that makes you feel as good as you look. You can get started at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off of your first fix. Again, that's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. stitchfix.com/MLB must redeem within 7 days of sign up. Offer does not include kid fixes. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate you all for tuning in. As always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow recapping Game 1 of this 2-game set against Cleveland that kicks off on Monday, as well as obviously keeping everybody in the loop with everything happening revolving around the trade deadline. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the free 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Again, you can subscribe for free or check it out for free in the Amazon Fire TV channels app. So, talking about what went wrong in this weekend set against the Minnesota Twins, talked about the Greene injury, talked about Montero. We kind of touched on the offense a little bit before the break. Bailey Ober was on one. 8 innings, shutout ball. Tigers only recorded 1 hit. He had 11 strikeouts, I want to say. Completely uncompetitive. That is the worst that offense has looked in a while. And I do want to give credit to Ober. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, like the Tigers offense is just terrible and anybody could do that. Like he was, both things can be true. The Tigers offense cannot be very good and Bailey Ober can be absolutely on one. And I think that was kind of what we saw on Sunday. He was hitting his spots. He looked unhittable and he dang near was. So now you're at a point where this lineup is already not great. And now, if you think back to opening day or just before opening day, and you think of all the people you had expectations for going into the season, the core of this lineup that you expected to be run producers and be reasons why this team won games. Spencer Torkelson, Riley Greene, Kerry Carpenter, Parker Meadows. All 4 of them either hurt or demoted because of their play. And it's not just one of either of those, right? Meadows and Torque both demoted. Meadows obviously currently hurt. We'll talk about that a little bit toward the end of the show. And then Greene and Carpenter injuries. So somehow you are still 52 and 55. A lot of that has to do with pitching. I think, coaching, etc. There's a lot of reasons we've already highlighted on here. But like that is almost all, right? Outside of Colt Keith, who people obviously had expectations for going into the season. Like you've gotten production from Winfield Perez, Justin Henry Malloy, you've gotten solid enough production from some guys that you didn't expect to have to rely on or lean on going into the season because 4 of your biggest workhorses, that at least 4 of the guys you expected to be your biggest contributors are now, at this point in the season, all 4 of those guys are not on the major league lineup on a game-to-game basis. So, again, that's like when we go into the deadline and we're trading Carson Kelly and we're probably going to trade Jack Flaherty and there's probably going to be another trade or 2 in there. Like, it's tough for me to be like, no, like you got to keep this group together and they got to go for it. Like, I just, again, I just read off, I'm going to start talking in circles here, but it would not shock me, my point being, it would not shock me if the offense continued to slide like they did, again, for 2 of 3 games, not all 3 games or anything like that this weekend. I just really don't want them to ever look like they did in June, really ever again for my entire life. I hope I live a nice long life and never have to watch the 2022 Tigers offense again and the May-June 2024 Tigers offense ever again. I will live a very happy life if those 2 things don't occur ever again. Bullpen game, the bullpen in general, kind of hit or miss this weekend. I've been giving AJ a lot of credit, been pumping his tires a lot in terms of, how well he's been doing in bullpen games. This weekend, not great, but I don't know. I'm not trying to sound like an apologist for how he, the decisions he made and whatnot, but at the same time, there's a reason that no team in the history of baseball has ever just done bullpen games every day for 162 games, because it's impossible. You will burn out your pen. That's not how it works. You need innings, and this team currently is getting innings from literally no one outside of Tarek Skubal. Nobody, right? So it's tough. Like again, there's a reason teams don't do it all year. It's gonna hit the fan. It's gonna catch up with you eventually. You can't do it consistently, and I feel like that is much more of a reason as to why the bullpen kind of struggled this weekend. Again, more so in 2 of 3 games. Jason Foley also used in back-to-back games. Jason Beck pointed out first time he's been using back-to-back games for in a while, and he's just had a weird year. I wonder, and I am not the first person to bring this up. A lot of people in the Tigers media circle have brought this up, and I don't think I've talked about it on the show. It's like I really do. I'm getting to the point where I'm wondering about his health. Like they refuse to use him in back-to-back games. They don't use him really unless it's outside of a save situation. Like he doesn't get usage very much outside of that. He was pumping 100 to start off the year and hasn't really come close to consistently doing that since. Like I do think there is legitimate standing on that take of like, is he, and clearly he's not hurt enough where, arms are valuable. They're not going to mess with somebody who is like maybe even is legitimately hurt, but I don't know, like dead arm. It's been like 4 months. I have a hard time believing he's just had dead arm for over half a season. But like, you know what I mean? Like it's so mind boggling how different he looks now than he did in the month of April. And I think it absolutely should be some sort of cause of concern. So he struggles on Sunday, like pretty much everybody does, not just him in a vacuum. Let's talk about what went right. Was not all for naught. They did win a ball game. They put up a lot of runs. 7 on Saturday. Saw some really good pitching from Tarek Skubal on Saturday, as well as we are accustomed to. 7 innings, 5 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts, and then the home run against. Obviously, his ERA is now 2.35 on the season. I would be floored at this point if Skubal was traded. I would be very, very surprised. I do not anticipate it happening. I know that's going to keep coming up. I'm just going to keep talking about this every day until the deadline passes, and then probably again in the winter. But I really, again, they would need the Godfather offer. They would need some ridiculous, obscene, just like disgusting amount of high-end prospects that nobody on the planet could refuse. And I don't think that another team is going to give up that sort of offer to get 3 years of Skubal. That's obviously not an indictment on Skubal's talent. He's the best pitcher in baseball for my money. But just when it comes to like what you're going to give up 3 or 4 guys with 6 years of control that play every day for one starting pitcher with 3 years of control that's had an injury history. And like this, if he finishes out this year, will be his only healthy season in his career. Like that, I just don't think it lines up. The Tigers should not accept less than a Godfather offer. I don't think another organization is going to throw one of those out there. So I think Skubal's going to be here. That's great. I really like the fact that the best pitcher in baseball is going to be on my baseball team for the next 3 years. But he was absolutely fantastic. And, like I say he was fantastic because to the standards of the rest of the league, he was fantastic. To his own standards, I actually think this was, a few outings in a row where he was fighting himself a little bit. And again, like the fact that he didn't have his quote unquote best stuff and went 7 innings, 8 Ks, 2 runs and got a win. He's unbelievable. And I fully expect him to be on this team for the remainder of this season and probably going forward, but that'll be a discussion we can rehash in the winter. Got a couple more players that I want to talk about on the side of things that went right. Then we'll get into stuff. We'll talk Carson Kelly, corresponding moves for Greene, Parker Meadows update, a lot in today's stuff section. We'll do all of that right after this. Going to talk to you today about our friends over at supplyhouse.com. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and their latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands. Get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, you can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supplyhouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, discounts on every order, and so much more. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So talking about what went right this weekend, Colt Keith didn't hit on Sunday, but nobody did. Sunday was brutal. Nobody really played well. Pitchers didn't really perform too well. Hitters were brutal. If we just throw Sunday aside, which you obviously can't do, but for the sake of this, Colt Keith, really solid weekend, crushed a ball on Saturday. It was a fastball up and in from a lefty, crushed it. Went the opposite way and he was late on it still. Nope. Turned and burned inside, hit it 400 something feet, absolutely annihilated the baseball. Had a little home run hop step afterwards too. He might just be here. He has like an 1100 OPS over the last month or something ridiculous. He's figured it out and it's awesome to see. So shout out Colt Keith. Javi homers in 3 straight ball games leading up right until a streak that, again, obviously ended on Sunday with the shutout. Homer in 3 straight games. I believe his OPS is still sub 500 despite, it's 484. It's actually not even really close to 500 despite homers in 3 straight games, but we'll take it. The third one was a fastball up and in, which I genuinely did not think he was capable of doing anymore. Right? That used to be his bread and butter. I genuinely didn't think it was possible for him to turn on a fastball 95 miles an hour up and in and hit a home run off it anymore. So I'm glad he still has that in him. The other 2 were off of breaking balls that caught a little bit too much of the plate. Glad we're seeing some signs of life from him. If we can get him to be playing productive ball the rest of the year, that will certainly make the conversation in the winter a whole lot different. Andrew Chafin and Shelby Miller, I think, had solid weekends as well. Andrew Chafin, I think, is gone. And we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk stuff. So Riley Greene put on the IL. Ryan Vilade called back up. So now him and Bly Madris coexist on the Major League roster. Parker Meadows started a rehab assignment in Toledo this weekend as well. That's fantastic news. Hopefully he can return to the Major League team here pretty soon. I'd imagine that will be for Ryan Vilade, I guess, or maybe Bly Madris, depending. But I'd imagine it'll be for one of those 2 when he is ready. But hopefully it's a pretty quick turnaround. He shouldn't need too many swings because it's a hamstring injury. Hoping once he can run with confidence, he's kind of just going to get called up. It doesn't really matter how he hits and whatnot. So we'll see, but I'm really excited for him because I really liked what I saw in, the 3 games before he got hurt after getting recalled back up. Let's get to the biggest news probably from the weekend. Well, Riley Greene, probably still the biggest news, but the second biggest news from the weekend off the field. Carson Kelly traded to the Texas Rangers on Sunday afternoon. The Tigers get Liam Hicks and Tyler Owens from the Rangers in return. I want to start off with the Carson Kelly side of this. This is a win for this organization. You got to remember, this is a guy in Carson Kelly that was literally cut mid-season last year. This guy was waived by the Diamondbacks in the middle of the season. What was it, June or July? Around this time last year. He was waived, and the Tigers picked him up. He did not hit well last year. They exercised a player option, or a team option rather, to keep him around for this year, And he has very, very quietly, in terms of like the national media scale, been one of the better offensive catchers in baseball over the last couple of months. And on top of that, his defensive metrics, rather, grade out really well. So there was always going to be a market for him. This was like the slam dunk, no-brainer. You obviously have to move him player from the Tigers roster. So it's also, because of that, not surprising that it does not get a huge return for a couple of reasons. One, catching depth is not exactly the most competitive market out there, right? Like there's not a ton of teams that are like, we need to go all in on backup catcher. And at the end of the day, this is catching depth for half of a season from a guy that was cut or put on waivers from his team a season ago. So like, I personally was never expecting, like some people really freaked out. We're like, you didn't even get top 30 prospects for him. Like, I don't know what everybody expected. I was not, certainly my bar was clearly lower than a lot of people's. I never expected to get a huge haul for half a season of Carson Kelly. And they didn't get a huge haul. Again, Liam Hicks and Tyler Owens, both in Double-A for the Texas Rangers. Liam Hicks is a first baseman / catcher, fits the Scott Harris mold a lot. He walks a good amount. He does not strike out very much. Really fits the mold of this organization. And then Tyler Owens is a righty reliever down in the minors. Yeah, look, at the end of the day, again, this is not a very noteworthy return. I'm not going to call it underwhelming because I was not expecting to get blown. This is like about my expectations for what the return was going to be. I was not expecting to get blown away by a Carson Kelly return, given where the situation is at. I don't anticipate Hicks to be like a huge part of the major league puzzle going forward. I'm not sure. We'll see how he looks, but he's 25 years old and in Double-A for the Rangers. So I would imagine he probably finds himself in Toledo by the end of the year, at least, if not immediately for the Tigers. But I don't anticipate him to be like in the mix for the major league team, long term. I will say Tyler Owens somewhat intrigues me. I promise I'm not trying to sell you like that. Oh, this was way better than you think. Like, I can't reiterate enough. Like this is not a super flashy, like really big return. If you are looking for a silver lining or a slimmer of, optimism within these players, I think it's within Tyler Owens. There is a decent profile there for a guy to become a solid reliever at the major league level. He's 23 years old in Double-A, good strikeout numbers, not very high walk numbers, has a pretty solid fastball. When he was younger, like this is a guy that at times, if he was just max efforting, could hit the upper 90s, like 98, 99 miles an hour, but usually sits more mid 90s, which again, for a reliever is fine. Pretty spinny slider, which is, I imagine those two things, good velo, good spin, is probably the reason why the Tigers targeted him, why the Tigers front office went after him in this trade. So we'll see. He's a little bit on the shorter side in comparison to, like other major league pitchers. Nothing against, my under 6 foot people out there, but just, that's one thing that a lot of people look at with pitching is frame and what I think he slides in at like 5'10". So there was some, people, I know Cody Stavenhagen said something about like maybe his frame being somewhat of a concern going forward for organizations. But at the end of the day, again, this is half a season of Carson Kelly, who had a 5-something OPS last year and was cut and is a free agent again this winter. Like, I'm just going to take what we can get for him. And the reason why you still trade Kelly and there's not a camp of, oh, well, why don't you extend him and whatnot? A, he's in his 30s, and outside of this season, he hadn't been good in a while. And B, and far more importantly, this clears a roster spot for Dylan Dingler. Dylan Dingler was a, second round pick in 2020 in the draft where we took Spencer Torkelson. He has had a solid amount of hype for a while. and has had, I don't want to say a rocky, but just like it took him a while to get fully acclimated to professional ball, which it does for catchers. That's normal, right? Goalies are very similar if you follow hockey. Like it takes a while to develop a goalie. They aren't just ready overnight very often. And that was something that, Dylan Dingler had to go through the growing pains a little bit of becoming a professional ball player and playing that often behind the plate. There's a ton of wear and tear on catchers when you play that often. And he has been incredible in AAA. He has been absolutely raking. He's been a plus defender. He's got a good arm. He's handled the staff really well down there. Flying colors he is passing with so far in Toledo. So that's really exciting. Dylan Dingler, almost assuredly, I would be at this point stunned if he was not on the Major League roster going forward. So it looks like your tandem behind the plate the rest of the season is going to be Jake Rogers and Dylan Dingler. And it's really exciting that we're going to get a chance to see this kid play. It's been, again, he's been in the system for a while. What is that, 4 years now? And he's, again, kind of finally put it all together at the AAA level this season. So hopefully he can continue that momentum forward. If he struggles the first week or two, we need to not freak out. We've seen it time and time again, right? Malloy struggled, adjusted, has been hitting well lately. Colt Key struggled, adjusted, has been hitting well lately. We need to have some patience, okay? It's really hard to hit Major League pitching. But honestly, I'm more interested in how he looks defensively. I want to see if that translates to the Major League level because it's a totally different ballgame. You can be a really good defender in AAA as a catcher and a poor defender at the Major Leagues as a catcher because it's catcher and it's very, very hard. So I'm not just saying that because of my catcher bias because that's what I played. But yeah, I'm really interested in how he calls games, how much responsibility they're going to kind of let him have in that process early on, how he looks defensively. I know how mobile he is. I know he has a good arm, but like how are people going to be aggressive on running on him early? Probably, right? Like I have a lot of questions with him defensively and the offense. I'm sure I don't expect him to ever be like an elite hitter, but I'm sure at some point he will develop into, around a Major League average hitter. And if he can do that, then we're talking about a guy who could be on this ball club for the next 6 years at least, which is exciting. So thank you, Carson Kelly. Again, successful pickup for the organization, successful turnaround of his career, right? Carson Kelly a year ago was probably thinking, do I have a career in the majors? And now is going to go into the winter and probably going to get a maybe even a multi-year deal, maybe even a nice 2-year deal from a team somewhere because it completely revitalized his career. So credit where credit is due. Thank you, Carson Kelly, for the first half, and congratulations. Hopefully the Rangers, that was another thing I saw. Some people were like, the Rangers, the Tigers have a better record than the Rangers and they're selling to them. Context clues, everybody. Context clues, right? The Detroit Tigers, 12 games out of their division and 5.5 out of the wild card. The Texas Rangers, while 6 out of the wild card, are only 4.5 out of the weak AL West, whose first place team is only 55-50. Thus, the reigning World Series champs, they're going to be buyers. Okay. Oh my gosh, I just punched my mic. Sorry if that was loud. So looking ahead, and we're running a little long. I knew that was going to happen. We had a lot to talk about today. Trades. Look, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would imagine Jack Flaherty's gone. I would imagine Andrew Chafin is gone as well. He's been really good the last month or so. He's a lefty. He's been striking people out. I'd imagine he goes. Foley is kind of like, I don't expect him to, but it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world to me. Tarek Skubal, I do not think is getting moved. Shelby Miller, really like any reliever you can just throw out there and be like, oh, maybe. Like there's really like a 50-50 shot that any reliever is traded. Genuinely. Like that's just how relievers work. Who knows what other teams find value in, especially the lefties. I'd imagine they're not going to move Tyler Holton just because I think they like him a lot. And he's, if you trade Chafin, he's probably is your best lefty reliever then. But we'll see. The only other kind of wild card I'm going to throw out there, and John Morosi threw this out this weekend too, was Andy Ibanez wouldn't be like the most ridiculous thing in the world to me because he plays a lot of positions. He's played corner outfield. He's played everywhere in the infield, and he has an OPS over 1,000 against lefties. I'm not saying a team is going to necessarily make him the centerpiece of a deal, But it would not shock me if someone went, we need Andy Ibanez to get this deal pushed over the edge. I think that that would not surprise me either. So we'll keep an eye out for all of that. The trade deadline is Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So we have tomorrow, and then obviously, today, as you're listening to this, is Monday. Even my world, it's Sunday night. Yeah, we got a little bit of time, but we will obviously keep our kind of pulse on that situation as well. And then just when it comes to, what to expect out of the team going forward, like I'm glad that Diggler's going to get a shot, presumably. Just don't fall apart. Crashing and burning does not help anyone. You aren't trading away enough assets to make this team like, oh my goodness, they are good now, like the worst team in baseball after the trade deadline, right? Like even if you do move a lot of those names I just mentioned, like your main core, if they can ever be healthy again, is still gonna be here. So like this isn't an excuse to just like lose out. And I don't think it's healthy to do that either. I understand the draft pick stuff. I don't. It's like the most overrated narrative in baseball. It's like lose for draft picks. Right. That worked out really well with our 2-1-1s. Worked out really well. It's ridiculous. If you have good scouting and good player development, you can find talent anywhere in the first round. The Dodgers have the best farm system in baseball. They haven't picked in the top 10 since I don't even know when. Since I was going through puberty, maybe even before then. I was in diapers. I'm not sure. I promise it's possible to find good prospects without just losing. Okay, so on top of all of that, just my closing thoughts here are just like, don't let the bottom fall out on the season. Like, and the biggest reason for me is just I want to go into the winter believing that this core can work going forward, right? Like stay competitive. Because if it does fall out, and that's even like if it falls out with Riley Greene coming back and with, like any of those guys I mentioned earlier kind of coming back and playing whatever, poorly, well, it doesn't matter. If they do lose a ton, there's going to be a lot less optimism about the winter and about 2025. So in order to maintain the belief that the core you have right now could be competitive in the relatively near future, you need to not just turn into a complete dumpster fire the rest of the way, despite the fact that I think you can and should be selling. Okay, so it's a fine line to walk, but that's kind of where I'm standing. Also, I believe they have signed 19 of 21. Wow, we're way over time. We got to go. 19 of their 21 draftees, I believe they're signed. We'll go into that more in depth later in the week. Okay. Cleveland, Jack Flaherty pitching today, as you're listening to this, he's scheduled to at least. We'll see if that ends up happening. And then you have a bullpen game, as like pretty much all games that aren't Flaherty or Skubal are bullpen games right now. And for the millionth time, not only on the season, but in the month of July specifically, you're facing Bybee and Williams. We've played Cleveland 3 times in July, and we face the same pitchers every time. So let's see if we can do well. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Sorry for the long episode. We'll be back tomorrow. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.